This is LBC from Global, leading Britain's conversation. The Nigel Farage Show.
Well, last weekend we saw the first rumblings of a story about Cambridge Analytica and Facebook, and the story was that they'd managed to harvest about the details of about 50 million people from Facebook, and that they'd been involved with the Trump campaign and they'd been involved with the Brexit campaign. So I didn't think for one moment the story was going to stop there. And it's gone on a lot further this weekend, although not all these stories are directly linked, but we will go through them over the course of the next hour. But a Vote Leave campaigner has said the campaign was totally illegal. Now, he is a whistleblower. Shamir Sani is his name. He's 24 years old. He worked at the Vote Leave office as an intern a couple of days a week, and I think on an unpaid basis. But he did have a relationship with somebody called Ben Parkinson, who held a very senior position there and does, as a civil servant, hold a position in government today. So is this a lover's tiff that has got completely out of control, or does Shamir Sani have something to say that perhaps we should be listening to? And it's the front page of The Observer. They're the ones that have been running this stuff for a long, long time. And the accusation actually he makes is not about Cambridge Analytica as such. It actually is about a donation that Vote Leave made. And it happened in the last few days of the campaign. It was to a guy called Darren Grimes, who was leader of Believe, a website targeting young progressive voters. They made a donation to Darren Grimes. They did so almost certainly because they'd spent their legal limit of 7 million, and Grimes then spent that excess money. That of itself, not against the law. What would be against the law is if they directed how Grimes should have spent that money. And indeed, that is, the accusation that Shamir Sani is making. Dominic Cummings, their chief strategist, says nonsense. Boris Johnson even moved to tweet overnight saying the whole thing is complete nonsense. As far as Cambridge Analytica is concerned, well, the one thing that Vote Leave did do was use a Canadian data company called Aggregate IQ, and they did spend money with them, designing adverts on Facebook and elsewhere to reach as large an audience as possible. There is nothing, folks, illegal or wrong in doing this. Claims have been made that Aggregate IQ has links in some ways with Cambridge Analytica, but nobody seems to be able to actually prove that. And as I say, that of itself is not doing anything wrong. And then we get another side of this story, which is that UKIP were involved with Cambridge Analytica, and that Leave.eu and Aaron Banks were brought into all of this. And I can clear that up. UKIP did speak to Cambridge Analytica, and Cambridge Analytica put a proposal to UKIP whereby they would go through UKIP membership data to give us an accurate, up-to-date profile of who our members actually were. Indeed, we carried out a very similar operation to that just a few years previously. As it turned out, Cambridge Analytica had a look at the data, asked us to pay a bill to do the work. The bill never got paid, so I can say hand on heart that Cambridge Analytica never worked for UKIP, and they never worked for Leave.eu. They were part of the bid to get designation. Leave.eu didn't get designation, Vote Leave did. Look, folks, what's going on here is there is an establishment attempt to try to rubbish the Leave campaign, to say the Leave campaign lied, to say the Leave campaign were dodgy with money. And I'm asking you, do you think the Leave campaign cheated its way to victory? Come on and tell me what you think. I'll take any calls, any opinions. 0345 6060 973. You can text to 84850. You can tweet using the hashtag Farage and LBC at LBC. You can watch us on Facebook and comment there too. Elaine is calling from Watford, a first-time caller to this show. Good morning, Elaine.
Good morning, Nigel. Yeah, I was a Leave campaigner in the Watford area, and I campaigned in Wembley, Olympic Way, as well as in Harrow, mostly in Watford, supporting the street campaigns. And it's completely untrue that Leave was somehow cheating. We were underfunded. And the proper time for young Mr. Shanna to bring this up would have been when the Electoral Commission held their inquiry. It was sometime last year or even earlier. They investigated it. Now, if he knew some truth or something suspicious, he should have come forward then. That was the proper time for it. And I think also there was a parliamentary committee. I'm not sure if it was a financial audit. I've tried looking it up, but there's loads of information online. But the proper parliamentary select committee also investigated the funding of the Remain campaign and the Leave campaign. And they were investigating from the point of view that David Cameron spent $9 million leafleting every household. It was an unfair advantage. We were only allowed to spend $7 million. But I'll tell you something else, Nigel. Because Leave EU wasn't selected by the Electoral Commission until sometime in March, they'd actually done the classic thing of fracture your opposition. We were, Aaron Banks's parties, different fundings, different streams, before Vote Leave was chosen as a representative. It was quite late on. And it meant that it was difficult and people were scrabbling around to get started to just even raise the $7 million. Meanwhile, the Conservative Party, the Lib Dems, the Labour Party, although there was a Labour Leave, were funding, and they already had the foot soldiers, the door knockers who go around at general elections.
Yes, well,
they were well underway, and they were ready with their campaign materials. Even before the Vote Leave was chosen, they had printed handbills and things. They've got the funders, they've got the local distributions networks. I feel that as a Vote Leave campaigner, we were at a tremendous disadvantage.
Absolutely.
And it's amazing that we did so well. And I made great friends with lots of complete strangers. I was at the Great Debate, and it was me that shouted rubbish at Sadiq Khan that something's picked up.
So you're a heckler of that.
Yeah, and I listened to Priti Patel and Michael Gove, Boris Johnson. I went to the Forum of Fish Island. But mostly I gave up. I've got a job to do, 9 to 5, and I've got a working week. I gave up a lot of weekends, and so did my partner. And we spoke to people on the street, and it's ordinary people across the country that gave Leave voters the confidence that ignore Project Fear, and it's turned out to be ridiculous. The claims, and I think we've got...
All right, so you've got full faith that the Leave campaign did the right things, and that actually, and your real point, Elaine, and it's a very, very good one, and you've made it, I was going to make it, you've made it already, is that actually we were under a tremendous disadvantage.
We were. Definitely.
Yeah.
And standing in Watford, there were 4 stalls. One was Remain Conservative, one was Remain Labour, one was Remain Lib Dem. There's a Lib Dem mayor was at the time. Yeah. And there was just a small band of people giving up all day Saturday. Yeah. We were so outgunned on the street. They already had the infrastructure in place. But just one other quick point, Nigel. It seems that there isn't enough of a spokesman. I took your point. There needs to be an umbrella organisation bringing together the different groups that exist now.
Elaine, I tried to have an umbrella group for the referendum, but the folks at Vote Leave, Tories to the last man and woman, wanted nothing to do with an umbrella group. They wanted their own campaign, chuck in one Labour MP here and there to make it look cross-party. And that was one of the problems that we had in the referendum, is that I always got the feeling that Vote Leave actually were more interested in the next Tory leader than they were the referendum itself.
Possibly. One quick point on Diane Abbott on the television, Any Questions, decided to slate the government on the blue passports being printed in France and Netherlands, wherever. Nobody in the audience, and I thought David Dimbleby should have picked it up, nobody contradicted. The reason why is because of the 50,000 cost means that you've got to go out to EU rules, that you've got to go out to tender. Nobody pulled up on that. There seems to be no one.
Elaine, I mentioned this on Sky News. You'd have thought I'd sort of uttered a swear word. But yeah, EU tendering rules. Elaine, thank you very much indeed. And Elaine is right. She's absolutely right. Both sides, in theory, could spend $7 million during the referendum. But the political parties could also spend money, and more of those, of course, backed Remain than backed Leave. And blow me down if on top of all of it, David Cameron did not spend £9 million of taxpayers' money sending every household a booklet telling us why Remain was the right option, how I enjoyed going up 10 Downing Street and posting it back through his letterbox. So the idea that somehow the Leave campaign hid spending and did all sorts of odd things is nonsense. We've been outgunned, and the Remain side have spent money for 50 years. The European Union spends over €2 billion every year on promotion of its institutions and its identity. Shanjan is calling from Bradford. Good morning.
Good morning, Nigel.
So,
I believe what is happening is we've seen a globalist establishment attempt, one, to bring down the government, two, to spread fear stories, and then number three, also to damage the UK's reputation on the world stage. Because if you look at what's happened now with the Russia affair in Salisbury, if you look at what's happening with this Cambridge Analytica story, and now this Vote Leave whistleblower, it's all part of an attempt to overturn the result.
yes, it is. That is absolutely my view. Yes.
But here's the rub. Why don't we think about why did people vote to leave in the first place? Why did people do this? I don't think Cambridge Analytica told people, and I know you were involved with overseas with the Trump campaign, I don't think anybody in West Yorkshire or West Virginia who worked in, let's say, coal mining were told by Vladimir Putin or Cambridge Analytica let me just say this, to go and vote to leave the EU and put Donald Trump into the White House. I think people have their own brains, and here's the rub. You can't replace mining with McDonald's.
No,
That's what you can't do that.
No,
and expect people to be happy.
The idea that some sort of mind-bending formula was discovered to make us all go crackers and vote Brexit and Trump is ludicrous.
I don't believe it. And I think what we see is that when we watch the news and the media, there is so much anger, resentment. That is all the time it feels. You're on social media, all the time you get abused. But when you go out into the streets, like when I'm speaking from Bradford,
yep.
If you go into some parts of the city, there will be somebody who voted Remain, because maybe, a woman in her 40s, because she's very well off, she works at a block of offices in Leeds, has a BMW X5, and she was likely to vote Remain. Whereas somebody on a council estate at the age of 45, stacking shelves at Sainsbury, was more likely to vote to Leave because they felt worse off. So how do politicians resolve that problem? Instead of going back and forth on this referendum, why not just close it down, accept it, and think forward and think, how do we make sure
Shanjan, we need vision. We need vision. We need leadership. But today's story is that an unpaid intern, a whistleblower, is saying that the Leave lobby cheated and that the whole thing, frankly, was illegal. Do you think the Leave campaign cheated its way to victory? If you do, come and tell me that on 0345 60 60 973. You're listening to the Nigel Farage Show exclusively on LBC, and the time now is 11:17. Well, strong claims this morning that the Leave campaign may well have broken the law, may well have been an illegal referendum, may well be that the Leave lobby cheated its way to victory. And this is not just about Cambridge Analytica, it is also about a payment that Vote Leave made to a student based in Brighton. We can't go into too much detail, it gets complicated, but do you think that the Leave lobby cheated its way to victory? But before we get there, another story that I think is really, really interesting. Only the Sun on Sunday has got this story, exclusive by David Wooding, and it says Donald Trump is lining up a surprise summer visit as a Brexit troubleshooter. So Trump is coming to Ireland. He's due to be there as early as June. He'll visit Dublin first, and then he's seriously considering an offer to go and visit Northern Ireland, whether that's Belfast or elsewhere, I don't know, afterwards. And pretty clear to me, and by the way, I think this story is true, that he is considering doing this, and pretty clear to me that would be a very good thing indeed. Why? Well, interestingly, Trump has got contacts on both sides of this divide. You can find photographs of Trump and Jerry Adams. They go back a few years, but Jerry Adams speaking at dinners in New York, Trump in attendance, and has said publicly that he knew him. And obviously Trump knows one or two Brexiteers as well. He knows one sitting in this chair this morning. So Trump does, he does have knowledge of both sides of this campaign. Maybe if anybody can find a solution to the Irish border, maybe it's Donald Trump. Hey, he's managed to get the North Koreans to agree to sit down and have a meeting. So I see this as a very positive piece of news, and I really hope he does come to both the Republic of Ireland and Northern Ireland in June of this year. Now, my next caller on the subject of did the Leave campaign cheat their way to victory? Helen is calling from Weston-super-Mare. Good morning.
Hello, Nigel.
Hi.
Hi. No, absolutely not. It's just the most massive case of sour grapes. The establishment just can't get over the audacity of us plebs voting against their instructions, I'm afraid. The Remain campaign had, the majority of everybody supporting the Conservative Party, the Shadow Cabinet, practically all the MPs, all foreign leaders.
Barack Obama, Goldman Sachs.
The big banks, the big business. They had their extra leaflet at $9.5 million. They had an extra 48 hours tacked on for registration, if you remember, because the website went down for 2 hours.
I do.
They even, and I know this is a bit sensitive, but they kind of used the death of an MP in the campaign. And that's before you even start talking about Project Fear.
Some would argue it the other way on that, Helen. But
I know.
But Helen, if it okay, let's try and be devil's advocate. I mean, the only accusation really that I can see that this so-called whistleblower is making is he's saying that £625,000 was given to a student based in Brighton running a website called Believe, and what he's saying is, whilst making a donation like that to a separate campaigning group would not have been illegal from Vote Leave, what would have been illegal is to direct how the money is being spent. So let's say, for argument's sake, there was something in that claim. Would that give the Leave vote a problem?
No. The playing field was so totally tipped in their favour. And wasn't it only a few weeks ago that the Lib Dems had a similar thing where their spending was found to be much more because they had actually failed to include certain people in their spending returns?
Yes, and, frankly, Helen, if we're being frank about it, there has been gross overspending in all sorts of by-election campaigns over the course of the last few years. Some would say even overspending in one or two general election seats, but for legal reasons, I can't go any further than that this morning. But yeah, I mean, actually, if Vote Leave had spent their $7 million and had an excess nearly $750,000 and decided to give it somewhere else, you could argue they were scrupulously trying to stay within the law.
Well, exactly, and I distinctly remember them actually running out of money a couple of weeks before the actual referendum and scratching around, and other parties having to come and help them out because they had no money left. They didn't even have enough money for any more boards.
Yeah. So, Helen, you're not concerned at all?
Not at all, no.
Not one little bit. Helen from Weston-super-Mare, supremely relaxed there on the Bristol Channel this Sunday morning. Russell says it's pathetic. So the Leave camp cheated, and that's obviously why they won the referendum. Typical Ramonas, fundamentally refusing to accept the result, just like in the US, where the Democrats fundamentally refused to accept that Trump won. They try every trick in the book to reverse the result. Well, certainly, the journalist at the heart of this, at the Guardian Observer, Observer, is Carol Cadwalla. And she does seem to be pretty obsessive about this. She said on the Andrew Marr show this morning that the money that was spent on social media through Aggregate IQ, a firm in Canada, this money spent by the Vote Leave campaign, she said they spent 98% of their money on this. Well, maybe you're good, Carol, as a journalist at finding out who meets who and who talks to who, but they did not spend 98% of their money on this. They might have spent 35% of their money on this, maybe 38% of their money on this. But to go on television and say they spent 98% of it shows, actually, you haven't dug as deep as you like to give the impression. This, by the way, the same Carol Cadwalladr that says that I am at the centre of an international global conspiracy. It is me who links Putin, Trump and Assange, and that was wrong too. Rudy is calling from Exeter. Good morning, Rudy.
Hi, Nigel. How are you doing?
I'm doing well. So are you concerned about Cambridge Analytica and what's gone on here?
No, and the thing is this, Nigel, right? What these people do not get, these Ramonas do not get, it wouldn't matter what you spent, what the statistics would be, we all would have voted anyway. We already had it in our mind years ago to do it. And what they say and what they do will make no difference. Even now, I will never vote to stay in the European Union if I had a referendum again.
Right.
And they just don't get it. They just don't get it makes no difference to people like us. We want to get out of the European Union. We voted to get out, and we would have voted regardless of how much money would have been spent on the Leave campaign. We made our mind up years ago.
But they're trying, Rudy. I mean, there is an establishment attempt. And by the way, if wrongdoing is found, it's found. I'm not sure they're going to find any, but let's see. But and I'm sure both sides should be forensically investigated, not just one side. But Rudy, they keep saying that we lied through it all, and now they're saying we cheated through it all. I mean, do you think they'll give up at some point?
Well, they may not give up, but the point is it will make no difference to the people that voted Leave, and they don't get it. They can shout through the hills if they want. It's not going to change the people's vote. And the more and more we see the way May is attempting to stitch us up and the way the European Union are doing it, it's just going to cause more and more people to decide to vote Leave because I say we don't want this.
What? That's if they forced us to vote again. Well, really, I tell you what is interesting. Despite acres and acres of media print on this and radio and television coverage, and it's been going on for month after month after month, the Leave side lied. I mean, goodness me, they told my parents they were joining a common market and not to worry their little head. But they keep on with this, and yet it is not changing the public's appetite for a second referendum one little bit. It is only 20% out there that think we should have a second referendum on the final deal.
But the thing is this, Nigel, what they don't realise is this, right? The people that are living it every day in these towns and cities that are affected by it, they're living and breathing it every day. So they don't care what they see in the newspaper or what people tell them because they go by what they see and not what people say and what they experience. Like I have to wait 3-4 weeks for a doctor's appointment. Yeah. You know, all these kinds of... This is what they don't get.
No, they're the real issues. They are, yeah. Rudy, and they haven't got better. In fact, arguably, they've got worse since we voted to leave. Rudy,
and just one more thing,
go on quickly.
Before you go, right, quickly. Right, with regards to the Northern Ireland border, there is one solution, and that is Southern Ireland can join us to leave. Then there's no problem.
Well, wouldn't that be wonderful? I couldn't agree more. Thank you, Rudy. I was in Dublin a few weeks ago saying that at a Saturday afternoon rally, much to the horror of the establishment. Dave says to me by text, perhaps on referendum morning, it was you, Nigel, that sneaked around the country and put something on people's cornflakes, because kind of that's what they're attributing Cambridge Analytica as having done. They did not. You're listening to the Nigel Farage Show, exclusive in LBC. The time is now 11:30. Now, my guess is very few people understand this Cambridge Analytica story, other than the fact they use Facebook to get people's data. And that's kind of opened up, I think, in terms of Facebook itself and many forms of social media, some pretty big questions in people's minds about when they go online to do things, to what extent are they actually being tracked, and is their information being sold on or given to other organisations? It's really interesting that Cambridge Analytica was said to have got the details of 50 million people, the vast majority of whom, by the way, were in North America. What was really interesting was it turned out that the Obama campaign 4 years before had used Facebook to garner the details of 200 million people. But Obama's a nice guy, so it's okay. Trump's horrible, so it's bad. I mean, that's the kind of hypocrisy that is going around this. Been a very bad week for Facebook. Their share price has fallen very significantly, and polls showing about 2/3 of Facebook users concerned about some of the potential level of intrusion into their lives by using that medium. But hey, I think it really goes for virtually all forms of social media. So I understand the complexity of this, but I'm interested. I'm really interested. Is this story, which makes the front page in The Observer, and is, of course, mentioned elsewhere, is the basic story an accusation from people who backed the Remain campaign and still do? The accusation that the Leave campaign cheated and lied. Is this a story that actually gets out there into the country and makes people who voted Remain angry? Because at the moment, I've not had one of you call me to say to me, of course, the Leave campaign cheated its way to victory. Now, normally on this show, I have no difficulty over issues of Brexit in getting people to come on and say, Nigel, you're wrong, because. Sometimes in a polite way, not always, obviously, but generally in a polite way. And at the moment, I'm not getting anybody coming on backing up the Carol Cadwalla Observer story. And if I don't get anybody in this next 20 minutes, I'm going to conclude that stories like this are London media bubble stories that do not have any resonance in the wider country at all. James is calling me from Manchester. Good morning, James.
Hello, Nigel. Thanks for taking my call. Quickly, the biggest crock that I've seen in quite a while going on here. Your callers, and I think Sanjeev was one of them in particular, said nearly everything I was going to say. I'm 51, Nigel. I have never in my life had Facebook, Twitter, Instagram, absolutely nothing. And not only did I vote Leave, but I also campaigned for 3 months in my part-time spare time, 3 months door knocking, etc., etc., etc. And when one of your callers said that we were at a bitter disadvantage, we seriously were at a very disadvantage. The idea, this is just yet again, and I believe this has been put out from the establishment, yet again another smokescreen, right, to try and force a second referendum on the country, right? It's all a load of rubbish. And to think, to insult people, insults the intelligence of people that some formula somehow or other made them vote. Your previous caller was talking, Nigel, about doctors and waiting times. This hit the nail on the head. The establishment don't realise what's going on the ground, and that brings me to my last point, Nigel. You know, I was reading time and time again, you know, on the news, on the media, on the internet, you know, these marches, anti-Brexit marches, this, that and the other. And for all the people who are listening, and all the people who are listening in the establishment, they have got no idea, Nigel, no idea of the amount of anger that is bubbling under up here in the north with this Brexit negotiations, etc. Right? They call Putin he's a dictatorship, and because he won by 75%, it was all rigged. Right? No, Nigel, we live in a dictatorship. We voted to get out in June 2016. We're now having to wait 5 years, if at all, before we get out. The dictatorship is here. It's not in Russia and all these other places. And the anger, Nigel, is like a boiling kettle. It's going to boil over, and the kettle itself is going to explode. Wow. They've got no idea what is going on at foot level, right? And any more attempts of this nonsense, and the whole thing is going to blow up, and they're going to see something that they've never seen. They had 3,000 people, which really means 300, on the streets of wherever yesterday saying we want to stay with the EU. Stay with the EU then, yeah? You have your army, and tell all your children, by the way, that Juncker's next line of attack is full-on conscription for all your children, like they still do.
Well, he wants a European army, James. I'm not sure he wants full conscription, but you never know. James, you've got huge passion. I can tell you're very upset and angry. Thank you for your call. And James saying, you know, no one said to him, no one tried to mesmerise him, no one tried to poison his mind on the internet. He made up his own mind. On Twitter, I get, for all their bluster about the supremacy of our nation's laws, Brexit fans are only concerned about denying that Cambridge Analytica affected the EU referendum result. Apparently, the possibility that our democracy and legal system were undermined is meaningless to them. It's meaningless, matey, because you've been trying this in America for the last 8 months. You're now trying it here, and nobody actually believes it. If there was real cheating, Well, it went on from the establishment, and it happened with our Prime Minister blatantly for spending 9 million quid of our money to send a leaflet through every single door in the land. We have been massively outspent. The Remain side, massively outspent the Leave side. They've been doing it for 50 years in constant self-promotion. Peter says by text, don't understand, Nigel. If Leave spent more than it should, and Remain spent more than Leave, when is this journalist going to call for an investigation into Remain? Very interesting. Cara Cadwell, as I said, on the Marr show this morning, she was directly challenged on that point by Isabel Oakeshott, who said, come on, if you're looking at, if this is not politically motivated, why not look at the Remain campaign? And of course, she fiercely refused to do so. Sylvia is calling me from Putney. Good morning, Sylvia.
Yes, hello, Nigel. We've got another 3 years of this while we're still in this 3 years after we're supposed to have left. And I don't care what they've spent. I don't care whether it's 10 million or 10 pence. My vote would have been the same. My vote comes from my experience of life pre and after being in the EU, and that's what governed my vote. I'm old enough to have been around before we signed up in 75, and I voted no then. And I don't use the Facebook, so I'm not going to be influenced by any of this stuff. I just rely on my own experience of life, and I think these spending rules should be scrapped. I don't care what they spend. If they want to spend 10 million, 20 million, so be it. And if the others haven't got so much money, it doesn't make any difference, Nigel. They don't have to spend the same. It doesn't influence people.
No, actually, Sylvia, I mean, one thing I've seen is that money is not everything in elections. Having the right message and resonating with people, that's what really counts. And, don't forget, I've fought general elections, I've fought European elections against the establishment mainstream, never been able to compete in terms of money, but there were times when, in terms of message, I could compete with them on a very even basis. Sylvia, how do you feel when some people say that we've sold out our children's future? How do you respond to that?
Yes, I do think so, because I've lived pre-EU, you see. I'm old enough. I'm one of the old codgers that didn't know what they were doing. And, life was much better before we went in. We seemed to be freer. I mean, us youngsters in the 60s, I think we travelled much more than the youngsters do now. We just went when we liked, for as long as we liked, to the continent. So, we found ourselves jobs.
Yeah.
And it was so easy. Now they're talking about having visas and not being allowed to stay. And I find it so weird. And you see, the youngsters now have been influenced by their left-wing teachers are telling them they won't be able to travel abroad and all the rest of it.
It's extraordinary, isn't it?
I know.
Sylvia, I think that point you've made about in the 60s, people heading off to Europe and getting jobs and doing... You didn't need a European Union to do any of that. It's a beautifully made point, and I thank you very much indeed for that. Thank you, Sylvia, for your call. Yep, but that's how it's been presented to much of the nation's youth. I think it's wrong, but now on top of that, they're being told that the Leave side cheated and lied their way to victory, and very few of you are coming on 03456060973 to tell me that I was part of that great conspiracy. You can do so if you want. You're listening to the Nigel Farage Show exclusively on LBC. It's now 11:45. Did we on the Leave side lie and cheat our way to victory, as is being suggested by a whistleblower, albeit only an intern, in the Vote Leave campaign? Well, I wonder what Russell in Tower Hamlets makes of that. Good morning, Russell.
Hi. Yeah, I'd like to say that you were wrong in saying that they weren't affecting the vote. Let me start by stating the fact that all the advertising, all the TV adverts and the public debate and everything, they're all designed to influence not the people who have already decided, but to influence the people who haven't decided.
Yes.
So we were all after the people who are undecided. So if I give you an example, that I know of someone who's very close to me who voted for Leave because of an advert on a bus that claimed about something about the NHS.
Yeah.
Now, she voted to Leave on the back of that, and only on the back of that. So
Russell,
that's
when you
an influence.
Russell, a moment ago you used the word "we." So were you part of the Remain campaign?
Yes, I'm part of the Remain campaign.
Okay, fine.
So there's nothing. There was no advert that's going to switch my bias on that, and I was going to vote for Remain regardless. But those adverts are not going to affect me. The extra spending or the whatever spending has gone on wouldn't have affected my vote, but it would have affected the vote of the people who were undecided.
Okay.
So there's no point of people who were decided to vote to call in and say that, hey, that vote, that advert or that much spending or that little spending or whatever, that cheating or whatever is not going to affect me. Well, yes, it isn't going to affect you. It's going to affect the people who are undecided.
Well, Russell, I put it to you, as somebody who was part of the Remain campaign, I put it to you that when David Cameron spent £9 million sending a booklet to every house in the country warning us about the dangers of Brexit, that actually that was massive overspending and an abuse of his position.
Fine. I'll accept that, and then I'll also say that bring the court case on.
Right. So,
as I would say, with every single mechanism that anyone has used to defraud the voter should be challenged, just as much as this should be challenged.
But we can finish up, Russell.
Every single advert that has gone and that has been used to go against it, that's been a lie, should be challenged too.
Okay, Russell, do you not worry that if everything, clearly we have to have laws and rules and guidelines as to how campaigns are fought, but do you not worry that we could finish up in years and years of people questioning how both campaigns behaved?
Not at all. The risk of losing our rights our rights to vote properly and to lose our democracy, the cost of that is way more than any cost that we would spend in order to fix it.
Yeah, I'm not worried about that. I was worried about the time. I also do question.
Yeah, it's including time. If it takes 10 years to fight this case and to put the people who are accountable, to whatever punishment that's due, I think that's the money well spent or time well spent. But we shouldn't ignore it. We shouldn't just say, these guys might have overspent, so we're not going to pursue it because it's going to take us 10 years.
And do you not think
that's rubbish?
Do you not think the timing of this so-called whistleblower is a bit odd? Every opportunity was there last year when the Electoral Commission were looking into both sides in the referendum. Isn't the timing of this a little bit strange?
I don't think it is strange at all. I think the timing was because Cambridge Analytica, somebody whistleblowed on them against the Trump campaign, and as on the side of that, some other whistleblower came out.
All right.
There's no. I don't think there's a conspiracy theory there, as much as you try to prove that.
Well, I'm asking a question, Russell. I want to ask you absolutely straight. Do you think that the Leave campaign did spend money badly?
I've got no idea.
No. Fine. Russell, I thank you for your call. And a bit of breaking news is that the former Catalan president, Carles Puigdemont, has been detained in Germany. The politician who's been self-imposed exile following the Catalan independence referendum last year. I don't quite know what's going on here, but he was intercepted by German police at the Danish border. More of that on LBC as that story develops. One thing for certain is that the Spanish government in Madrid are not softening one little bit towards the Catalan separatists. Dawn is calling from Rayleigh. Hello, Dawn.
Good morning, Nigel. I wanted to phone you to tell you I believe they did cheat.
OK, good. Tell me why.
Same as the previous one. Form. Big fat lie on big red bus with big fat Boris Johnson standing in front.
Now, what was the lie?
It was about if we leave the EU, we can have all this money and we will give it to the NHS. The actual amount was debunked fairly swiftly, and the idea, we're going to give it. No, they're not. They're never going to give all that money to the NHS. They knew they were misrepresenting that.
it was an odd choice of number, even though the gross figure technically was correct. And I mean, even though it was correct, but I'd much rather they'd used a figure that was lower than that. A couple of 100 million a week would have been fine.
Use the proper figure and thought maybe we could give some of this to the NHS, but that's not going to look quite so good on a big red bus with big fat.
Well, if they'd said 200 million a week we could give to the NHS, it would have been unarguable, and it still is a figure that would have stunned people. Whether the figure was 200 or 350 made no difference. But I agree with you; it wasn't a very clever thing to do. But
so it's showing them up as a liar, basically. Just coming quickly to you, Nigel.
Yeah.
I absolve you.
Oh my goodness me!
Yeah.
Is that because it's Sunday morning and we're all being nice to each other?
Well, I'm in a nice mood, and also I saw an interesting television program called NCIS. I recommend you watch it. It's very nice eye candy. But one of the characters in it, Tony DiNozzo, has problems with his father because he's a police officer and he believes his father's a con man. Yeah. There's a problem here.
Right.
And he's a bit of a Donald Trump character, this father. He's been bankrupt several times and so on and so forth, and he's always got entrepreneurial ideas. And when his father realises that his son has got his opinion of him in the back of his mind, he says, listen, son, there's a difference between being a dreamer and being a con man. I believe what I tell people. I have a vision and I believe it's true. A con man knows he's lying. And that's the difference between you, Nigel, and some other people.
Right, so I'm not a con man. I'm just a bit misguided. A dreamer. I'm a dreamer. Oh, Dawn, you know, after all the horrid things people have been saying about me for the last couple of years, for you to come on with a different point of view on a Sunday morning and to say that I'm a dreamer, I'm going to take that as a great compliment, even if you...
I still think you're wrong.
No, fine. Well, but that's the joy of democracy, and that's why LBC and Talk Radio is so wonderful. It's the ultimate form of democracy. Dawn, you're an absolute star. Do you think... You know, I mean, clearly the Cambridge Analytica story is desperately complicated. But do you think these accusations about money and spending by the Leave campaign are really relevant, given the £9 million David Cameron spent putting a booklet through our front doors?
Well, I didn't even read mine. I went to other more reliable sources when it came down to making my decision.
What, the Prime Minister?
Well, yeah, I mean, David Attenborough and Stephen Hawking, for starters.
Right.
You know.
Dawn, thank you ever so much. Have a great Sunday. And Dawn didn't even read that piece of literature put through our doors by David Cameron. I did. It made me very angry. It made me realise, actually, the Remain side have been cheating for over 50 years. They've spent hundreds of millions advertising themselves, and whatever the Leave campaign have done, if there is a minor infraction, there is one. But one thing for certain, there is not a major one. Well, you've been listening to the Nigel Farage Show exclusively on LBC. I'm back tomorrow night at 7. At 3 o'clock this afternoon, it's Alex Salmon. But up next, it's Majid Nawaz.
Thank you, Nigel.